so we're in 7.3 today, looking at linear functions. If you guys remember, in Chapter 4, we spent the first half of Chapter 4 learning how to graph them, but then they started giving us a graph and we had to go backwards and write the equation. Do you guys remember that? So you had a graph and you had to write the equation that was represented by the graph. That's exactly what we're going to do today, except it's just with functions. It's the same thing, okay? So we work within the framework of this formula, y equals mx plus b. It's real important that you remember what the variables stand for. Does anybody remember what m stands for? Tell me. Slope. And what does b stand for? Y-intercept. Awesome, okay? So that number that in that place in the formula stands for each one of those categories. And when I'm writing my own equation, those are the two pieces of information that I need to write my equation. I need to know the slope and I need to know the y-intercept. So if I'm given a graph, is there a pretty easy way I could find slope?
Yep.
Okay, now how many points are on this graph? 1, 2, 3, 4. You say, well, I need to count rise over run, but which one do I do? It doesn't matter as long as you're going left to right, okay? So you can start at the first two, the second two, you can skip one, but then you have to reduce, okay? So I just like starting with the first two, okay? So let's count rise over run together from the first one to the second one. How many do I rise? 1, 2, 3, and how many do I run? 1, 2, okay? So based on my rise over my run, we said it was what? 3 over 2. Y equals mx plus b. Where does 3 over 2 get plugged in for? And for which letter? M. Y equals 3 over 2x. What did b stand for again? The y-intercept. Can I look at a graph and figure out the y-intercept?
Yes.
Yes, it's where the line crosses the y-axis.
-3.
Oh. -3. The line crosses the y-axis at a value of -3. And that's my equation. That's it. Okay? So when you're given the graph, count rise over run for slope. And where does the line cross the y-axis? Sometimes it crosses the y-axis on a point, and sometimes you just kind of extend the line to see where it crosses the y-axis. This is on your quiz and your test next week, okay? So go ahead and do the second one now on your own, and then compare your answers with your neighbor. We need to count rise over run between 2 points. So I'll just pick the second two. You pick the first two, it doesn't matter. Rise -1, run 2, because I'm going down from left to right, it's going down. Did you guys catch that? Y equals -1 over 2. Now where does it cross the y-axis? -1, -1. All right, did you get, oh, forgot my x. Did you guys get it? Did you guys get that? -1 over 2x -1. Or if you missed it, do you see where you went wrong? Okay. Any questions? All right, so now we're going to write a linear equation using a table. All right, so now we don't really have a rise over run that we can count. Okay, but we do have another way that we can find slope. We still need those two pieces of information, slope and y-intercept. Connor, do you remember?
You do the y2 minus y1.
Yes. Okay.
Over x2.
Yes, very good. So you can pull out any two ordered pairs in the table, okay? I like just starting with the first two because that's just the first two. You can pick the last two. As long as you don't go backwards from right to left, picking out your ordered pairs, you'll be okay. All right, so so y'all picked the same ones as me for this one. I picked the first two ordered pairs. And guys, I cannot emphasize enough, please write your ordered pairs down. Don't try to do it in your head. All right, and another thing, all right, I want everybody to write down your slope formula to find slope, and let's say it together. All right, this is just a review. M equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And once you write the ordered pairs and you can see them, it's so much easier to make sure you're picking the right number. All right? Don't try to like visualize it from the table and plug them in that way. Pull them out, write it. Okay, let's see. Nick, could you tell me which one of those four numbers is my y2 value?
Your Y2 value is 7.
Yeah, very good. My y2 value is 7. Michael, what's my y1 value?
Y1.
Yep.
1.
No, y1. Up there
Oh.
in those two order pairs. What's my...
Y1 value would be 9.
Yep, very good. So 7 minus 9 over x1 is what, guys? Negative 2 minus what?
3. Negative 3.
Negative 3. So remember, the minus is a part of the formula. So if I have a negative that I'm plugging in, what ends up happening? Yes, that's a double negative, okay? So now double negative, I want you guys to go ahead and do the math. And let's see who can finish. Who could maybe use the table to go back and find their y-intercept too. So y equals negative 2x. Now, if you just said negative 2x, that's fine. I put it over 1 just because rise over run. But you don't have to. And now something in the table tells me what my y-intercept is. Does anybody remember? Nick?
The one with the 0 in it. So
The 0 for
the X.
x. That's important because if you look at the next one, I have zeros on both values. Okay, so I look for the 0 for the x value because that means I don't go left or right, and I go up 3 to plot that point. The line crosses at a value of 3 plus 3. Okay, all right, so now I want you guys to work in your groups on the second one. See if you can get the equation. Write it in function form, y equals mx plus b. You have to find slope and y-intercept. All right, let's go ahead and work on it. Raise your hand when you think you have your function. All right, so I pulled out the first two ordered pairs, negative 2, negative 2, and I saw that most of you guys wrote them down, so you listened to my advice, and I think that was a great idea because I saw a lot of right answers, so that's great. Okay, so I pulled out my two ordered pairs and used them to find slope. Had a lot of double negatives, didn't I? Negative 1 minus negative 2, 0 minus negative 2. Change those double negatives. I get positive 1 over 2. Now, y equals 1 over 2x. Now, here's the question, because I actually have two ordered pairs that involve a 0. But one is the y-intercept and one is the x-intercept. Which one is it, Mason?
The first one is the y-intercept.
Yes, how did you know that?
Because it's the x is the 0 and not the y.
Yes, the x is 0, which means I don't go left or right, and I go down 1. This next one means I go right 2 and up 0, so that's actually my x-intercept. Okay, but x-intercept is not what gets plugged into my equation. B stands for the y-intercept, so it should have been 1/2 x minus 1. All right, so if you got it right, great job. If you missed anything, like any small errors, do you see where you went wrong? Okay, it's at this point, it's usually just really minor kind of things, but we still have to figure out where we went wrong, so hopefully we get it right next time. All right, this one looks kind of busy. And I know this graph, I put the wrong graph in your notes, okay? So y'all will just look up here for the graph. The graph is not the most important part of this problem, okay? The interpretations are. If you remember back to chapter 4, we did some interpretations. We said, okay, we found the equation, so we do need to write an equation here. But what does that equation mean? All right, so we're actually going to do the graph last. The interpretations are really what we're focusing on here. Okay, it says the table shows the revenue in millions of a company when it spends $1 million in advertising. All right, so we're going to follow our pattern in that the top category is going to be our X category. Okay, we can still follow that pattern. Usually X is on top, Y is on the bottom. All right. So the x-axis values are going to be the advertising. Okay, so I'm going to put an A down here on the graph. Those are my advertising values. The y-axis values are going to be my revenue. Y'all with me so far? Okay, so that's the way that you're going to set it up. If it kind of ventures off of the x and the y, the top one is still x, the bottom one is still y. That is important. Okay, so now I need an equation. I have to have an equation to start with. Okay, on a quiz it would say write a linear function to relate R to A in this case. Okay, that starts with slope. That starts with slope. We have a table. We need to find the slope. I need to pull out two ordered pairs. 0, 2, and 2, 6. Pull out those ordered pairs. You have that gap in between. I want you to write them there. 0, 2, and 2, 6. Now that I have two ordered pairs, can I find the slope? Can I find the slope with two ordered pairs? All right, go ahead and do that. All right, so did you guys get 6 minus 2 over 2 minus 0? Okay. So did you get 4 over 2? Okay, did you reduce it?
Yeah.
To 2 over 1. Okay, so M equals 2 over 1. But remember, guys, remember the order of slope. It's rise over run, right? Slope. So if 2 is my rise, okay, 2 is rise over run. You might remember me doing this. Which value, was it revenue or advertising? Remember what rise is. Which value, tell me revenue or advertising, is my rise value? Micah? It's my revenue. That's important when you're going to try to write this in a sentence. So the 2 stands for revenue and the 1 stands for advertising. You need to understand that part. Okay, does everybody see how I got that? All right, revenue was my R, but that was my rise values. Advertising was my X, which stood for my run values. Okay, let's go ahead and finish writing the equation. Y equals 2x, or 2 over 1x. And can I look back to the table to figure out my y-intercept? Josh, what do you think on your y-intercept? 2. 2. We're going to go to our interpretations now. I need to put my slope, 2 over 1, into a sentence. Okay? Remember what 2 stands for. What does 2 stand for? Advertising or revenue? Yes, revenue. In the millions of dollars. Okay, so here we go. Hey, give it to me. What do you think?
Every $2 million,
Okay, so let me help you get started. Okay, so the company, for every $2 million spent in, or I'm sorry, for every $2 million of revenue, the company needs to spend how much? The company spends $1 million in advertising. Okay, and this is a pretty constant rate, which sometimes doesn't happen. Obviously, this is kind of made up, right? All right, we normally don't see such a consistent pattern. However, does that make sense? Does that make sense that the more money you spend in advertising, the more money in revenue you would bring in? As long as your advertising is effective, right? What do you think are some effective forms of advertising in today's culture?
commercials.
Commercials. Do you also watch cable TV? Or is it only streaming? I mean, I know all we do is stream. Anybody still watch cable? So maybe, well, unless it's football,
Yeah.
right?
unless it's-
No, I
So maybe football commercials are holding their value, but we don't really watch a whole lot of cable TV anymore. So maybe those commercials aren't as effective. But what about social media? Yes. Social media advertising is really where it's at now, right? Those Facebook ads. Anybody ever like been talking about something and all of a sudden it's showing up as an ad on your phone? It's kind of like, oh my goodness, my phone's listening to me.
Yeah, the FBI watching us.
Yeah, I know, it's kind of creepy.
We get watched.
YouTube.
And people think your Alexa listens to you too, which there is some truth to that.
That's why they always premium.
All right, hold on. We're still on the recording, so we got to get back. Okay. So we interpreted the slope. Do you see how we did that? Do you see how we did that? Okay, so Michael's going to give the Y-Intercept a shot.
Right. For every $4 million of revenue, the company spends $2 million in advertising.
Okay, so you're on the right track. I get what you're doing. Now, remember, which ordered pair includes the Y-intercept? Which one? The one with 0 for X. Okay, so that's important. Okay, so now I need to put this ordered pair, the Y-intercept ordered pair, into a sentence. Connor, you want to give it a shot?
For every. Oh.
It won't start with for every. If the company spends,
if the company spends $0
right?
on advertising, they make $2 million.
Exactly. When the X value is 0, which in this case, that's advertising. If the company spends nothing, they say, we don't care about advertising. We're just going to go by word of mouth. Anybody ever heard of those companies? They're like, hey, word of mouth, right? You don't see a whole lot of commercials for, I don't know, I'm kind of drawing a blank. Yeah, the Popeye. I saw some commercials when it first came out, though. If the company spends nothing, our pest control guy, he's real big on this. He said, he's been in business 30 years. He's never paid $1 for advertising. He goes by word of mouth. And that's just his thing.
Does he get paid?
Yeah, he makes a living. Nothing on advertising. Now, possibly, he is very good on advertising. They can expect $2 million in revenue. So let me ask you this. What if $2 million in revenue is going to bankrupt them?
It is. I think he's
Okay, possibly. Possibly. It depends what kind of company it is. What does that mean about advertising it if $2 million isn't going to cut it?
Don't advertise it.
No, unless you want to go out of business. If $2 million isn't enough to keep you in business, guess what you have no choice but to do? Advertise. Okay? So, hey, $2 million might be enough for your small business, right? If it's just a couple employees. But if you're like AT&T, y'all cell phone commercials, right? Those are like real big. Okay, you need to make more money. So advertising is really important. The graph is important, guys. Basically what we would do here, all right? I'm not saying it's not, but we've already done some graphing, but all we're doing here is we're taking these order pairs and we're graphing them. And what do you think is going to happen to the slope? So I'm just going to plot these real quick. 0 up 2, 2, yes, definitely a positive. And it's a pretty steep slope too. 2 up 6, 4 up 10. We're just showing on the graph over 4 up 10, over 6 up 14. And over 8 up 18. Okay, pretty steep slope. See if I can get the line to go straight through it. Oh, that's pretty close. All right, and then we can just see on the graph, and this part is not on your notes, so don't worry about it, but we can see on the graph some more proof that the advertising is effective. Wouldn't you say it's effective?
Yep.
Okay, the more money I spend on advertising, and they can use this kind of information to project what if they need to make $26 million in revenue. Could they keep going and figure out how much they would need to spend on advertising? All right, be real strategic about that. Okay, so we're going to end the lesson here. All right, we're going to work on a little bit of classwork. There's classwork paper on there. It's not graded. Today's Wednesday. It's not homework. All right, but especially the slope interpretation problem. We're going to focus on that one. But that'll be everything for the lesson.